There is a conversation happening right now in kitchens and living rooms across this country, and it sounds like this. I've just been a little forgetful lately. That's normal at my age, right? And most of the time, the person on the other end of that conversation nods and says yes, because that's what we've all been taught to believe. Forgetfulness is aging. Slowness is aging. The fog is just aging. But what if some of what we're dismissing as normal? What if some of it isn't? Credibility anchor. I'm Dr. Hayes Anderson, and after 22 years in senior health, I've seen firsthand what happens when the early warning signs of dementia are mistaken for the ordinary passage of time, and how different the outcome can be when someone catches them early instead. Today I'm going to walk you through 3 specific warning signs that are commonly mislabeled as normal aging. Not because I want to frighten you, but because the difference between those two categories, dementia beginning and normal aging, is a distinction that can genuinely change what happens next. I'm also going to explain what's actually happening inside the brain when these signs appear, because understanding the mechanism gives you something far more powerful than fear. It gives you a reason to act. And I do need to warn you about the third sign, because it's the one most people, and many physicians, overlook entirely. And it's the one I've seen go unaddressed the longest. Here's something that rarely gets stated plainly enough. The brain does not go quietly. When something is wrong, it signals. The problem is that those signals are quiet at first, easy to rationalize, easy to normalize, easy to attribute to stress or poor sleep or simply getting older. And the medical system isn't always set up to catch them early either. The average cognitive concern gets mentioned during a routine physical, evaluated in under 10 minutes, and often reassured away. Not because doctors don't care, but because the early signs are genuinely subtle, and subtlety gets missed. This is not your fault, and it's not a failure of your doctor. It's a gap in how we talk about early cognitive change. My goal today is to help close that gap. Before I walk you through the 3 signs, I want to tell you about a woman I'll call Catherine. She was 71, a retired librarian from the Pacific Northwest, sharp-witted and voracious about crossword puzzles. She came to see me not because she was worried about her memory felt fine to her, but because her daughter had noticed something. Catherine had started repeating herself in conversation, not constantly, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. She would tell the same story at dinner that she had told 30 minutes before, with exactly the same delivery, as if she were telling it for the first time. Catherine had no memory of the repetition. That detail mattered enormously. Normal aging can cause us to forget what we said last Tuesday. What it does not typically do is erase the memory of a conversation that just happened. That distinction, recency versus remoteness, is one of the first things I look for. Catherine's evaluation led to an early Alzheimer's diagnosis, but because it was caught early, she was able to begin treatment, make lifestyle adjustments, and plan ahead with her family while she was still fully able to participate in those decisions. Early caught means early acted on, and early action changes trajectories. Warning sign 1. Repeating the same story, question, or statement within a short window of time, and having no memory of having done it. This is not the same as forgetting a name or losing track of where you left your glasses. This is a specific pattern, short loop repetition, where the same content is delivered again within minutes or a single conversation, with no awareness that it already happened. It tends to be noticed first by the people around the person, not by the person themselves. And that lack of self-awareness is actually part of the sign. The underlying mechanism here involves the hippocampus, which is the brain's primary structure for forming new short-term memories. When the hippocampus begins to be affected by early Alzheimer's pathology, the buildup of amyloid plaques between neurons, it loses its ability to properly encode recent events. The brain's filing system begins to malfunction. Old files are intact. Recent files aren't being saved correctly. This is why someone in the early stages of dementia can tell you exactly what their wedding was like in 1974 and cannot remember asking you a question 5 minutes ago. It isn't selective, it isn't willful, it's anatomical. And it produces a very specific pattern that is distinctly different from the ordinary forgetfulness of a healthy aging brain. If someone close to you has mentioned that you've repeated yourself, and if that repetition happens in short windows, within the same conversation or the same day, that is worth more than a polite laugh and a getting old joke. That warrants a real conversation with your physician, not because it definitely means dementia, but because it is a signal your brain is sending, and signals deserve attention. But repetition is only one of the 3 signs, and the second one is more nuanced, which is exactly why it gets missed so often. Warning sign 2, getting lost or feeling uncertain in familiar places. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. Everyone has a moment of confusion in a new parking lot or a strange city. That is not what I'm describing. I'm describing something more specific, a growing sense of spatial uncertainty in environments the person knows well. Places they have navigated for years without a second thought. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Raymond. He was 74, a retired electrician, still drove himself to his weekly card game at the same community center he had been going to for 11 years. One afternoon, he pulled into the parking lot and sat in his car for several minutes because something felt wrong. The building looked familiar and didn't at the same time. He drove around the block twice before going in. He told no one. He attributed it to being tired. It happened again the following month, and the month after that. By the time Raymond came to me, after his wife found him sitting in his car 2 blocks from their home in his own neighborhood, not quite sure which direction to turn, 18 months had passed since that first parking lot moment. Raymond had been quietly navigating these micro-episodes of spatial confusion for a year and a half before anyone knew they were happening. The brain region most involved in spatial navigation and orientation is the entorhinal cortex, which connects directly to the hippocampus and is one of the earliest sites of Alzheimer's pathology. When this region begins to be affected, the internal GPS system starts producing errors. Not catastrophic errors at first, just small hesitations. Half-second pauses in places that never required pausing. A sense of things being slightly off in familiar environments. The person almost always recovers quickly, which makes it easy to dismiss. But recovery doesn't mean absence of the problem. It means the brain compensated in that moment. It does not mean the underlying erosion has stopped. Spatial disorientation in familiar environments, your neighborhood, your grocery store, your church, your own route home, is not a quirk of aging. It is a meaningful neurological signal that deserves evaluation. Stay with me because the third sign is the one I've seen cause the most delay, and understanding it may be the most important thing you take from this video today. Warning sign 3, a change in judgment, decision-making, or social filtering, especially in someone who previously had strong judgment. This is the warning sign that gets dismissed most aggressively as personality, as crankiness, as stubbornness, as they've always been like that. And the tragedy of that dismissal is that impaired judgment, specifically new or worsening lapses in judgment that represent a change from the person's baseline, is one of the most reliable early indicators of frontotemporal changes in dementia. Here's what this can look like. A previously financially careful person begins to give away money impulsively, or falls repeatedly for phone scams. A person who has always been socially gracious begins making blunt or inappropriate comments that seem out of character. Someone who has exercised lifelong caution begins making risky decisions in traffic, in their finances, in their relationships, without seeming to process the consequences. The key word is change. We are not talking about lifelong personality traits. We are talking about a departure from who this person has been. The frontal and temporal lobes, which govern planning, judgment, impulse control, and social awareness, can be affected in certain dementia subtypes before memory shows significant disruption, which means a person can pass a basic memory test and still be in the early stages of meaningful cognitive decline, because the area being affected isn't memory yet, it's the executive system. A woman I'll call Agnes had been a retired school principal, organized, deliberate, deeply community-minded. Her son came to me concerned not about her memory seemed intact, but because she had donated a substantial amount of money to a phone caller she believed was a charitable organization, twice in the same month, then denied doing so when her bank statement arrived. And she had recently shouted at a neighbor she had been friendly with for 20 years over something trivial. Neither of these things was something the woman he knew would have done. He was right to be concerned. Her evaluation revealed early frontotemporal changes that had been quietly progressing for some time. None of these 3 warning signs is a diagnosis. Let me be very clear about that. Repetition, spatial disorientation, and judgment changes can have other causes: medication effects, thyroid dysfunction, vitamin deficiencies, depression, sleep disorders. Many of those causes are entirely reversible, which is precisely why evaluation matters. You do not wait to find out. The most dangerous thing any of us can do is explain away a signal that deserves investigation. Not because dementia is a certainty, but because the alternative explanations, many of them, are treatable. And because if it is dementia, the earlier it is identified, the more time there is to act with clarity, dignity, and intention. I want you to walk away from this video feeling not afraid, but prepared. These 3 signs are not a verdict. They are information. And information, when acted on, becomes power. So here is what I want you to do. First, have an honest conversation with the people closest to you. Ask them whether they have noticed any of these patterns. Not in a frightening way, just an honest one. The people who love us often notice things before we do. Second, if any of these signs resonate, either for yourself or someone you care about, schedule a cognitive evaluation. Not a reassurance appointment, an actual evaluation. Ask specifically for a full cognitive screen, not just a clock drawing test. Third, check medications with your doctor. Some commonly prescribed drugs in older adults, antihistamines, sleep aids, anticholinergics, can mimic or accelerate cognitive symptoms. A medication review can sometimes produce remarkable change. Fourth, support your brain with the fundamentals. Sleep quality, physical movement, social engagement, and blood sugar stability are the 4 pillars with the most consistent research support for brain health. None of them are dramatic. All of them compound over time. And one more thing, if you've been experiencing any of these signs yourself and you haven't said anything to anyone, I understand why. It's frightening. The possibilities feel enormous and heavy. But silence doesn't protect you. Evaluation does. Your brain has been working for you for 7, 8 decades. It deserves the respect of being listened to. Which one of these 3 warning signs surprised you most? Leave it in the comments below, because I read them, and your experience helps shape what this channel covers next. And if someone you care about needs to hear this conversation, please share this video with them, not as a worry, as a gift. In the next video in this series, we're going to go deeper into something that connects to everything we talked about today: chronic inflammation. Because researchers are now finding that low-grade chronic inflammation may be one of the earliest and most modifiable drivers of cognitive decline. And most people have no idea it's quietly happening in their bodies right now. That video is coming. Don't miss it.